Welcome to Untethered to Rooted, a podcast that brings you a collection of stories around grief, healing, and identity. Hear from everyday people how grief and loss shape their identity and how their identity shapes the way they heal and process grief. I'm your host, Daugherty, a licensed psychotherapist with extensive experience dealing with grief, both personally and professionally. And if you want to hear stories with gems and practical tools for healing, stay tuned for more. Hey y'all, Editor Dana here. Thanks so much for listening to our part 2. And this is my part 2 episode with Averry Cox, and tune in to listen to more of our conversation. And I'm curious, I'm wanting us to sort of dive in a little bit more into adulthood from childhood and what you've shared so far from childhood. So I'm curious, how has your mom's struggle with addiction really impacted your life now as an adult?
Yeah, well, it's never changed much. She became more of a recluse, and I moved across the United States, but even when I was closer to her, I still didn't see her. However, I'm trying to remember why, but I don't remember how we got reconnected. It was a few years ago now, but we went on a road trip. We drove from Seattle, or where she lives, Washington State, to over here in DC, so that I could check out apartments and stuff. I called her to talk about the impact of her parenting when I was writing my first book. And I was like, I was processing some things, and I realized that my takeaway from your parenting has been I just don't matter, or something like that. I remember sharing that with her. And because in the past when I've shared stuff with her about the impact, I was invested in her response, and this time I really wasn't, because she tends to go into theatrics and victimize herself. And I remember her trying to do this when I said that sentence, and I was like, I'm not trying to persecute you or whatever. I'm just trying to connect on how my upbringing was, and ask you about how your upbringing was. Do you feel like things were the same with grandma? Do you feel like, I was really going to this conversation trying to learn about impacts and generational stuff. And she said that things were different with her mom because my mom prioritized men over everything. Men and alcohol were at the top of everything, because men are going to support her, supply her things. She was very just really low self-worth, low self-esteem, but needed to be validated by a man. So that was her way of going about things. And I asked if it was the same with grandma, because we never saw her. She never had boyfriends, or she had 6 husbands or something crazy, and then after that 6th one died or whatever happened to him. Just never again. Just
This was your grandma?
Yeah, and just then Grams has just been on her own. So anyways, I asked her, and she said it was the same messaging or whatever, and she apologized. It was the first time she's ever apologized to me in my entire life. And so that's what stood out as significant. I was probably 27 at the time, let's say. And so, for 27 years, it had been I don't have a problem, drinking's not a problem, that sort of thing. So this was the first time she was wow, I never meant to make you feel that way, whatever. So I think that was
and that was all. Sorry, that was all in the context of understanding what her upbringing was, in the context also of writing your book.
Yeah, it wasn't a book yet, I don't think. I think it was still a blog at that point. But through the processing of what I was processing, it made me ask. So then we do this road trip. I tell her, I have a son at this point, so the plan is that she's going to watch my son while I do things that I need to do, which again, big deal, because I was raised by this woman and she wasn't really a parent, and I don't think she really has a relationship with her other grandchildren. So it was we'll see. It was kind of I was feeling it out, and so I made it clear that, there's no drinking around my son. And she was like, I'll be fine. So for the most part, like, she was doing fine, which I was like, interesting, because in my life, I've never seen her go a day without drinking. Maybe at tops 2 or 3 days. So this was like a big we'll see. And she did last, like, for a while. I think it was 9 days. She lasted for 9 days in this trip. And she was like, oh, you should take your son and go do something fun today, whatever, because I had the day off. And I was like, are you sure you don't want to come with us? She's like, yeah, it's fine. Anyways, when we came back, she was severely inebriated. Yeah, stumbling around, like, saying microaggressions about some, like, neighbor kids that were around the Airbnb. Yeah, just exactly how I remembered her from my childhood. I don't think I was that triggered, but I was just like, it was just so interesting to see her interact with my son, who I think was like 3 at the time. Yeah, he was 3. And watching how she interacts with him when she's super drunk, and she was just like fun. She's just like, oh, but like stupid, incoherent. Like, she's nonsensical, but to a 3-year-old who, you know, he didn't really know this woman that much anyways, but then he just was like, this is silly, I don't know. And then eventually she just like went to sleep really early, which again, yeah, very much like my childhood. So,
and at this point, like, she had already violated your boundary of like, please don't drink around my son. So like, in that moment, I'm wondering for you, like, what happened in that moment for you of just being like, okay, this is exactly what I said no to?
I think it was a multitude of things. I'm sure I was disappointed. I was also annoyed, and then just like uncomfortable, and it's like on high alert because it's just too many hats to wear because I'm a mom now also. So this isn't like, I haven't been trapped with her for a very long time, and so this felt, I was trapped. Also, it's like my name on the Airbnb, so if she does some dumb shit, you know what I mean? So I have to stay to make sure she doesn't like break something or do, so, you know, then again, I'm in the responsible position. I have to be the adult like I always have been. But, like I said, we are across the United States, so yes, she violated the boundary, and what are we gonna do? You know? What's gonna happen? But the next day, at some point, she was trying to act like nothing happened, of course. That doesn't really fly with me. And I think we were actually supposed to be leaving pretty soon after that to make our way back. So, like, another 3 days of a road trip, you know? So at some point, we are driving back. I'm going to sleep. She says she wants to go check out something. I don't remember. She wants to go to the casino or something. She gets drunk again. So it kind of just starts this, like, rolling, whatever, but, and then I'm like, again, this like high alert takes you back to childhood where you have to be hyper aware and looking for all the signs. How drunk is she? But now, again, like I said, I have my son to look out for.
I'm curious, is there like a conversation that happens at this point about like,
not when she's inebriated, no, but it's just like, so then after this time, I'm like, are we gonna talk about what you've been doing? And she's like, well, I don't know what you want me to say. Well, I know we're on the way back home already, but I think she tried to say that she wasn't like that drunk or something, and I'm like, you're smelling up the car. Like, I don't even want to ride with you, you know? And she mentioned that she didn't want to talk about it because she was too ashamed or something. So I'm like, so you can't apologize because you feel ashamed. So that's like as far as we got in that conversation. I think she probably apologized. Then, this is around the time also, once I take her back home, my son and I go back to Seattle, so we're like 4 hours away from her. She calls me at some point a few months later to tell me that my grandma has dementia or Alzheimer's. But I hadn't been talking to her, my mother, because, again, I'm like, I mean, what's there to say?
Because of this trip?
Yeah, you're the same person, you have now violated the boundary, whatever. But now she's calling me about things that, like, warrant attention, but she's doing it in her very triangulaty, victim-y way. It's just, everything is very dramatic with her. Anyway, so there was that. That was, like, adulthood, my first experience of, like, like, ah, damn. Not like I fell for it again, but like, it's just disappointing because even for your grandchildren, which I don't know if I had mentioned this before, but like, I told her when I was pregnant, and I was like, you know, I'm here in case you want to have a relationship with your grandchild, but like, not if you continue drinking like you do being an alcoholic. And she's like, I'm not an alcoholic. I was like, so you choose to drink. She's like, yeah, I could stop. It's very cliche, but like, yeah, I don't have to do this. I could stop anytime. And I said, so then you chose to have like an estranged relationship with your son and myself. So it's a choice, which I feel like that's actually worse to say. To be like, I'm not an alcoholic, it's a choice. I choose to have shitty relationships with people. So that was my first whatever. And so that's when I was pregnant. Then 3 years later, like I said, the phone call to her, going on the road trip, being reaffirmed of that. And then I don't remember why, but she came to Christmas. She came to DC after I moved here for Christmas. And she came with her husband this time. And I picked them up from the airport, and she was already drunk. Not belligerent, not that, but she was like doing the thing that she does, which is again very bizarre, but like, oh, Avery, I was telling people that I was coming to see you, and like, I was showing them a picture of you and how pretty you are, and like, I told them where you lived and asked them if they knew that area, and I'm like, so you're showing strangers pictures of me and where I live and my address and asking them. But everything is just like, oh, I'm friends with people, and she's like always so innocent and funny. I don't know how to describe her. She's a very...
Yeah, that's sort of been like the theme of like what you've been sharing about her is like there's been a lot of... It was confusing because like maybe there was a different... and maybe this is helpful for people who are listening too. Like, there's a certain like maybe schema around alcoholism, right? Where it's like you see it maybe in movies, maybe you see it like with people you actually know. But again, some of the language you're using of like, oh yeah, like this is an issue when you see someone being belligerent. This is an issue when you see someone like you see the consequences of a person's actions, like a car accident or something like that, right? But then the cognitive dissonance, or like it's not aligning or it's not really matching when you are seeing this person who is fun or enjoy like things that aren't really aligning with certain like frameworks around alcoholism, and then it's confusing. So then it's sort of like, how do I respond to this? I'm wondering, even just like with your identity as a therapist, and then just kind of like maybe understanding alcoholism more as like a mental health like condition that really is something that people deal with. I'm wondering how that knowledge played into just understanding what was happening in these moments.
I don't take it personal anymore. That's something where I'm like, it's really not about me. It's not about like my worth or anything. It is just this person who cannot accept the truth of things that have happened to them, and so they choose to escape through alcohol in this case. Yeah, I mean, it feels a lot like narcissism, if you know about narcissists, where...
I actually think, like, maybe you can expand on that for people who are just, like, who are, like, lay people. So, you know, I was couching it even in terms of, like, oh, yeah, alcoholism is, like, a mental health, like, condition. But people might not even realize that, right? And then on top of it, narcissism. So do you mind talking about both of those things, like, just as much as you want to share about that?
Yeah, I would say, what I was going to say about the commonality is when you treat someone who is narcissistic, it feels like almost incapable of seeing the truth of their actions, of their history, of how they became who they were. It's like hot pins and needles when you talk about real stuff, what they've done, how they've harmed people. It really brings on a lot of shame for them. And so they really lean into this like story of who they want to be, how they want to be perceived. And alcoholism, in my experience, in this way, actually, like, just from what I know in general of addiction, it's the same. There's so much shame around it that they can't acknowledge it. But if you grow up with someone who frequently doesn't acknowledge reality, it is gaslighting. So while I was no longer like, oh, this has to do with my worth or something, it still is a perplexing situation to be around. This is also why I don't work with narcissists, because I really like love my job, and I love to be like, let's dig into some stuff and let's look at stuff. That's the type of therapist I am. Like, it's about seeing reality and really cutting away the shame. So it's like helping people understand that they don't need to feel ashamed about how they've behaved or the choices they've made. It's just learning. Let's see why you learned to do that. Why do you feel like you leaned into these things? Okay, yeah, it's not a helpful behavior. Why do you think that is? So working with narcissists or growing up with this mom, it's like I can't exist around that, because I can't name the elephant in the room, because you're going to deny that it's there even though it's sitting on my chest. And you know what I mean? I can't, I don't know what to do with that. So yeah, so she came to visit with her husband, and I also laid down the ground rules of we're not going to be drinking here at my house, whatever. I'm already upset that you shared my address with what stranger at the airport that you met. I'm upset that you were drunk when I picked you up. Of course, you guys are not going to acknowledge that. And now also I don't really know this man who's in my home. But at some point, she asked me, this is also the day before my exam, my license. This is the day
to get your license.
To be fully licensed, yes. I had my A, I had my associates, but this was to, cut off the A and just be an MFT. The day before that, she wants to go out. She asked me for the keys to my apartment so that they can leave and come back whenever, after whatever, because I'm going to go to sleep because it's 9. And I say, I don't feel comfortable with that. So no, you guys are more than free to hang out here though. Or if you guys want to, do something else, but no. So it was the first time where I didn't feel too much about what was happening. Like, my adrenaline was pumping for sure, because I'm like, this is confrontation and this person gaslights me all the time, but I'm just going to name facts. For some reason, I was more comfortable naming truths and being like, I don't really care what this person says. Similar to the phone call, but different, because like, this is in person and I am setting boundaries around like my home, kind of like I'm not trapped anymore. They are in a way. Maybe that's what it is as I'm speaking. But yeah, she wasn't happy about that. She started to do some sort of victim-y thing, but I was, again, in a non-shameful way, like, we can talk about this, like, you're clearly upset. And she really was uncomfortable with honest confrontation, and I could see it. This was also the first time she's like squirming. She's so uncomfortable. And then her husband steps in to say something like, I don't like the way you're talking to my wife, and you're upsetting her. That was what they said. And then this is, again, I think they had like 3 more days to stay, and I did not hear from them. And again, the day before... So
they left, you're saying, like...
They left.
So they left your
their
home.
Stuff. They left my... Yeah, they left their stuff. They left my home. I sent, like, a text to my mom saying, like, I'm glad we could talk about something. Something like, I'm free to talk if you want to. And then she just never responded. And I've not spoken to her since. And this was years ago. Like...
Wow. So is her stuff still in your home?
No. Yeah, he came by himself to pick it up. I think, like, she stayed in the car or something. He was like, thanks for having us. And I was like, so she's just not gonna say bye to her grandson? Or... This was Christmas time. Did I say that already? So the Christmas tree is up. They have, like, gifts from my son and I that they're taking with them.
What a hard time just around the holiday. Like, even more so a time when there's so many different emotions anyway around the holidays, and then this happens, and it's
Yes.
like, oh.
And the day before my license, you have me worried. You have me like, you know, you're pulling a stunt. I don't know what experience you have with, I don't know, maybe she's histrionic or something. And I know that it's not like the focus to try to name things or diagnose people, but I don't know, in my mind it always helps me to like categorize things because it's been such a perplexing existence. But yeah, it feels pretty histrionic. Like everything is, whoa, and like you've hurt me and I'm the victim, and I'm going to choose this time the day before your very important exam to make something about myself. I'm not going to respond. You're probably going to be worried about me. I have this like enabler that speaks up on behalf of me who will make it so I don't have to set boundaries, who, you know, probably tells me I don't have a problem with drinking and whatever. So yeah, never an apology, never nothing, never an acknowledgement of this is what I've done, and just.
And that's the last time you spoke.
That's the last time we spoke. I sent her a message on Facebook about this. I was trying to find a girl from when I was a kid, from one of the many places we moved. I was like, does this person ring a bell? She just said no, and I was like, all right. But again, you know, nothing of like, thanks for the specialized Christmas gift you got. I got her like a cookbook on Etsy that was like engraved with her name. Like, no thank you, no how is your son, no nothing.
Just like an exiting out completely.
Yeah. I did, though, I will say, write a like scathing message letter sort of thing, because I held on to so many emotions growing up, so much anger, so much resentment, so much bitterness, and so I like decided to send that to her with, of course, the knowledge that she would never respond. She probably wouldn't read it beyond like, you know, when she starts to sense that there's criticism or upset from someone else. So I already knew she wasn't really going to read it, but I sent that to her as like I'm not holding on to these anymore, and I really haven't. It was really like helpful to send that.
It was like a release for you to be able to do that, or communicate your piece of like, this has been your impact on me. And there was no response to that. And so that was a while back. That was a couple years ago. A couple Christmases
Even
ago.
that message was a couple years ago.
Yeah. Wow. And so I'm wondering, like, just, you know, there's so much grief you're mentioning here, and maybe like we haven't explicitly even named this piece of grief in adulthood here, but I'm wondering, like, just tying that thread in of like grief and healing. Like, it sounds like writing that piece was maybe healing for you to be able to communicate the piece that maybe, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like that would be like a healing act to be able to like communicate something maybe you weren't able to communicate as a kid because of being a kid and being frozen, but then in adulthood you're able to communicate something like that. About like your mom's impact on you and how it impacts you and your son.
The grief piece is that there will never be anything that changes her, you know, because the change has to come from within, and there is not an external thing that has prompted her not having, her own children, not like, you know, boatloads and boatloads of shame from, you know, the towns that we've lived in, the people's husbands she slept with, the friends' sons she slept with, the many lives she has harmed and changed. No matter how many rock bottoms, nothing. So not a rock bottom. She was like lost at sea once. I don't know if it was at sea, in a river. She like, somehow she fell off a boat and people couldn't find her for like a week. And people were like, your mom's probably dead. Then she popped up later. I don't know where, don't know how. Just, again, it's very, very her. But like, that's near death. No
that
change.
Was like while you were, when she was a kid, or when?
No, like, I was probably like 20, 21, something like that.
Wow.
Yep. So rock bottom doesn't change. You know, again, like I said, birthing her own children didn't change. Her children having children didn't change. You know, there's nothing that has happened in her life that has sparked the desire to be different. She's had multiple health issues, COPD from smoking. I don't even know how her liver is functioning, but it's just like, I think she's also going like partially blind in one eye. There's nothing that is. She's just committed to the life that she's chosen, and so
I think that's my question a little earlier of like how much is choice and how much is the condition itself, right? How much is, you know, I think that is kind of probably a confusing thing for just a lot of people of just like, how much is this choice? How much is this how much does the condition affect the way your ability to be able to decide or make decisions or choose? And then, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question just in general, not even like with addiction, but, you know, the way people communicate, the way people lean into the things that they've learned from their parents and so on and so forth, you know, where it feels like they're committed to like anger or not being a team player, those sort of things. You come across those people in your day-to-day life where you try to have a conversation and they're not helpful or collaborative. So even if it's not addiction, there's so many ways in which I'm like, I understand that this is something that was taught to you, and I also understand that at some point it is a choice to look at your life and to see that it's not probably what you want it to be. Your relationships are falling apart. You're estranged from your family, whatever. These things that are signs that you could choose something else. You know that's possible. You've seen other people do it, but you don't, because it's really hard. It is really hard to look at the things that you've done, to look at the ways that you've hurt other people, to say, ugh, you know, that was awkward, that was a mistake, I didn't mean to. I know, like, regular people, not that addicts aren't regular people, but I just mean, like, in general, people who aren't suffering from addiction, from whatever else, they cannot say they made a mistake. Like, it's so hard for people to say, I'm sorry for hurting you. It feels like for a lot of people, it is, I don't know, it's like, it's just too hard. So, yeah, for someone who suffers from addiction and they've done a lot worse than whatever the thing is that this other person hurt a person, like it's tenfold. So I do understand that it would be difficult, and it is still a choice. It is still a choice to look at the way you're functioning and to, you know, go that route.
Yeah, no, I think that's just a good point. I just was curious to know your perspective and like hear it kind of fleshed out. And so I'm really hearing that like what would be, whether it's like people who are in the same position as you, right? They're like a child of a parent who struggles with addiction, or a friend or a spouse, like even expanding outwards, that I'm sort of wondering like what would you want to tell them? What also would you want to tell like maybe people who are in like your mom's position too, who struggle with that? If you could tell each of them something.
Yeah. I would say for the person in my mom's position, if you're someone who is struggling with the things that you have done that bring you shame, or even the things that have happened to you that feel too hard for you to touch, hence you need to escape, that really the only thing people in your life want to see is for you to be better. You know, not for you to suffer, not for you to grovel, not for any of these things, but for you to be okay and to be present, at least for yourself. Especially if they're at the point in their healing where I am, where it's not like I don't know, you're not super angry, you're not resentful, you're just like, you're a person that's suffering, and it's really sad to watch you, like, dig your own grave and to never climb out or to never, like, acknowledge that you're in the grave in the first place. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I would say for anybody in that position that people just want to see you do better for yourself. I can't say that all of your relationships can be repaired or that, everything can be salvaged. I can't promise that, but that's unfortunately just something you're going to have to live with. But that you can always change. You can always have a different life. You can always make the decision to heal for real and to hold the little you that was never held that you keep running from.
Yeah, I think that's like a lot of what I've been hearing from you say is just like how intergenerational this is, and how like being in a space of unhealing or being in a space of pain and not attempting healing or trying to figure out how to heal but not healing in the ways that are actually constructive just can have really rippling consequences. And how just like this intergenerational piece, I think it's so important that you're naming, of just how things get passed down intergenerationally. And it looks like a lot of different things for each generation. I feel like I've had this conversation with a lot of people recently of just like things that maybe weren't talked about that were harmful in our grandparents' generation, and then how did people cope when there were actually a lot of people talking about coping from those things, whether they were societal, whether they were familial, and that really in this like in that next generation of like parents' generation, that coming out in substance abuse, and that coming out in like disconnection and dysfunction and just lots of different ways, all influenced by, yes, familial things, but also societal things as well, right? Structural things and lack of supports, right? And then another layer coming down to like our generation of just like, oh, what does that look like? Maybe still substance use, right? But also on top of that, more like codependency and more other things that now we're dealing with. And all of those being symptoms of this intergenerational trauma or intergenerational harm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the other thing about being an adult with this is, and also having my own child, struggles are really apparent because you have firsthand experience now of like, oh, this is parenthood. This is how challenging it is. I could understand the desire to escape, especially if you come from a family like mine where it is very dysfunctional and you don't want to rely on people because, I don't know, you don't want something bad to happen to your kid or something. So I could understand, a person who has an extensive relationship with trauma, who doesn't have any coping tools and doesn't have family to turn to. She did what makes sense in a way. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, having a child is like, I could never do those things to a child because I couldn't. It's like no matter what, I couldn't take those easy outs. And, for people, I don't know, people might be like, addiction's not an easy out. I couldn't escape when he's here looking at me. Being a present parent is extremely challenging. And also, like, I just get to do everything the way that I feel like is healthier. Like, I have conversations with him. I talk about his hurt feelings. I show up to everything for him. Like, every graduation, every single sports game, every thing. He gets to be a whole person. He gets to scream, he gets to cry, he gets to be angry, he gets to say mean things to me. Like, he gets to experience life. There's no sort of like scarcity mindset. He has food whenever he needs it. That might sound like the bar's on the floor, guys. But really, it's it's something to relive these things and to be like, it's really not that hard to give him these things, or to, I don't know, so much of it I feel like has to do with ego, and that's not really a priority for me. It just isn't. And that could be like the autism or something. Probably a lot of it is, because I'm just like, let's talk about like the truth of the situation. I didn't like that I did that. How do you feel about it? Here's what, I don't know. It's just naming factual things. Like, he doesn't have to worry about gaslit all the time because my ego's not that important.
Yeah, and it's where like neurodivergence actually is an identity, or just through the lens through which you are experiencing the world, you get to have these like open, direct, honest conversations. Yeah, and it's different. You're a different person also, like, from your mom, and you've experienced different things, and maybe some things also similarly, but you're also just different people. You have different makeups. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What would you say to someone who's been through what you've been through, and just they don't know what to do, they don't know what to say, they feel stuck? Yeah.
Probably that they get to choose their community. They get to choose what makes them feel safe.
A lot of people talk about addiction as sort of like there's isolation is so present. It can be so isolating, and like, not an antidote, but like a protective factor from an addiction can be just being in community with people who keep you accountable, and being in community with people who like are also caring about your health in the way that, like, you know, being in a healthy relationship, not just any community, because there are also communities of people who are in the addiction world, and both on the healing side of being in the addiction world, but then on the other side of just like actively in maybe unhealthy relationships with like alcohol and other substances. And so community matters, but also like the type of community and what you get out of it also kind of matters too. Like, it's a different focus.
My mom would acknowledge how good of a therapist I was, and she would say, even if I was setting boundaries with her, like, I wish you were my therapist, can you be my therapist? Not to backtrack. And people can get hung up on there being like some magical way to fix or help, and so it can be easy to get in those relationships where a person needs fixing or needs helping because your parent won't do it. Yeah, I guess this just has more to do with like the impacts of having a parent like this.
Yeah, I really hear like kind of the language you're using. Like, it's hard to feel like you're put in the position of having to fix a parent, right? When really that's not even like the role you should be placed in the first place. And yet it's so hard to see your parents struggle, and you're like wanting, as you were saying, like wanting better for them. And so, but also, as you were saying, that like there is, while it's also like a condition, it's also like there are choices, and there's like motivation, and like what's their motivation to change, and that it sort of has to come internally too. It's not something that, maybe there are external things that could help, but really there's this like internal motivation is such a key factor that maybe can release people of some guilt of needing to feel like they have to fix.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing that you can't, that there is no magic way or perfect solution. Grief, it doesn't ever go away even after the acceptance that this person won't change, because you, as a parent, I will say especially, you're consistently reliving moments you never had and moments your parent chose not to do or be. And so while on one hand it's very healing to be able to provide a different experience, on the other hand it's very illuminating and heartbreaking to imagine yourself at whatever age it is that your child is not getting your needs met, especially if they're very basic needs. like imagining a little tiny me who can barely walk, because my mother has suffered from addiction for, I think, like since 19. So around the time she had my brother, and it's been to this extent. But when you're 19, people don't really know, similar to like when you're in college, people have really accepted alcoholism, that it just it's just part of the culture. So I'm sure that people didn't know my mom really had a problem for a while. That's a side note, that's an aside. But picturing little me who can barely walk, or even before I could walk, needing, and to have those needs just not be responded to, like crying or begging or asking for things, or walking up to her and she's passed out on the couch and she won't wake up no matter what, thinking about like, not only like how hungry I was, but how there isn't a person there to comfort me or help me. I just see them all the time being incoherent and unresponsive, and to have that be my life for 13 years until I moved out to experience a different type of abuse. But it's still like, so it's just a double-edged sword of parenting and being like, man, that's a real sad concept, even if I can't remember the things, to know that these were things that happened to me. And to just see, this is another thing that I tell clients a lot, because if anyone has experienced trauma at any age in childhood, because you have your adult brain thinking about it, you're like, yeah, that was a thing that happened. But if you are in the presence of a little person and you're like, oh, that's 5. Oh.
Yeah.
Or the driving situation, being like,
right.
My son is 6. Not now. He's 7 now. He just had a birthday. But, like, him driving a stick shift, he can't see above the, there's just so many things that I'm like, damn, to put that amount of responsibility is crazy. So it's also like very validating. I don't know. That's the last thing that I wanted to say, is that like the grief can't die if you're regularly reminded of the things you never had.
That's a good point. Yeah. I think that actually is that's a good note to end on, actually. I think that the grief is like ever present, ever continuing, especially if you have reminders around that, and that it's something that you'll always sort of have that grief present. And also like there's perspective taking that you had mentioned, of just like imagining yourself at a younger age. That's like a whole therapeutic intervention usually, right? Of like just imagining, doing inner child work. And so there's like a lot of healing that continues and needs to happen, especially as like this is like something that's like ongoing. But boundaries that I've heard you mention several times, of like that, how important that is to say your no, and to
nothing helps more than having a little person that you actually care about, that you actually do put before yourself. Like it's easier to be like no, and that's crazy, and you can't do that to him or talk to him that way, or like I don't want him to not know like what a bad person feels like, or when he should not be in friendships, like the things that he should not tolerate. So it's like a really helpful reminder to take care of myself, because I'm modeling these things for him, and I want him to have good boundaries. I want him to know what healthy friendships and relationships look like, and so that looks like creating that for myself and showing him what those things look like, and leaving things that do not fit that, even if that means like, I don't know, he doesn't get to see these people anymore or something. But it's talking it through with him and explaining because things need to be healthier and kinder.
Thank you for sharing everything that you mentioned about adulthood too. I think that's so important for people to know. Yeah. No, I'm hearing like just respect is really like that the respect is there, that the curiosity is there, that the willingness and openness to assess or inquire about yourself, the ability to be able to state your needs and expectations, have that conversation, the openness with that conversation. And perhaps it's a little bit more collectivistic than individualistic, actually. And that's sort of as another container you create. As we sort of wrap up, I'm wondering kind of what, like, dispelling some myths, and wondering kind of what you wish people knew about this topic, or what do you wish, if not, like, what do you wish people knew, what do you wish you knew that you know now about this?
Yeah. That you are not what has happened to you, and that something that was really hard for me to, and still probably would be if I thought about it, that like you have worth and value even if you come from a family that is tumultuous and dysfunctional. That like you are not your family, and the right person will see that, or the right friend, or the right whatever, And I don't even know what that's a part of, those like beliefs of melding, right? I don't know where this comes from, but when you marry someone, I'm sure you thought, I will have in-laws and I will, we'll do holidays, whatever, right? There's that sort of, that's just what happens. Again, I don't know where that comes from, or like our culture possibly.
Traditions, expectations. Yeah.
Right, but for people like myself, that's just not going to happen. There's not going to be, you're not going to get a mother-in-law, we're not going to go there for holidays, and it feels kind of like you feel like you are not contributing equally that someone else will, that you are contributing something black and tar-like, and they're like, I'm not going to create with that. I don't want that. I'm not going to adopt that. So it can feel really hard to have this family in tow, because you feel not enmeshed, like it doesn't have to be that strong of a term, but you feel like it's a part of you, like it represents you or something. And to dispel that, that's just not true. You are yourself. These things have impacted you and they have influenced you, and you get to decide who you want to be. You get to decide how you show up, and families look all different ways. You can have a family of choice,
Yeah.
Like your blood doesn't have to represent who you are. So that's what I would say. And I do have a piece, like I said.
So, what is the name of this piece?
Nyctalopia, which means like having a hard time seeing in the dark. I come from the darkness, so I must belong in the darkness. How could a brilliant person ever understand these abrasions? How can they see and interpret their observations if they've never had to adjust their eyes to the dim lighting my wounds originated from? How can they understand my wretched moments, never having been in the damp cellar before, the birthplace of my family's horrors? No matter how hard I try, I cannot claw my way into the sun. I cannot purify my core because of my virulent inception, because my origin is unchangeable. I cannot have the unsullied partnership I want because of where I've come from. The wounds of my past are too big to heal, and the virus feels too widespread among the others for me to treat. It is wholly overwhelming and intimidating. So I feel I must leave them alone and locked away, existing, rotting, noisily haunting me from the murk. When I surround myself with radiant individuals, I feel imposterous no matter how bright I now shine. This disease will surely ooze out of me and stay in one way or another. I will have to face the music and explain, and who could possibly understand if they haven't lived in the dark themselves? What Brightborn could possibly want me? Will I ever be good enough? Does it matter how much I participate in ecdysis? Or should I only go after an appropriate fit and be realistic? What a silly notion to force regression. To feel obligated to burn my light out for the swamp. To feel responsible for the growth of an entire people. To feel that I must be a savior. Their actions reflect on them. They are in charge of their choices, beliefs, and place in the world. They are responsible for challenging their internalized message and breaking generational patterns. I was never meant to be accountable for the elders. I was never meant to be strong enough to pull this civilization from the quicksand. I was not born with the purpose of soothing their distress, to solve their problems, to be their source of feel-good. I am one body. I am human with my own needs that deserves my focus. I am not a drug. I am not the mirror from Snow White. I'm not a replacement for entertainment or accountability. I am not an ego booster. I am not where I came from, and I am not responsible for them. They are not a representation of me. Their demons and decisions are not a reflection of me. I am in charge of me, and that is enough. Whoever I surround myself with that loves me will easily be able to celebrate me and not package us all as one. They will be capable of discernment and grace. They won't devalue or make generalizations. They will see me and perceive these abrasions as battle scars, simply evidence of experience, escape, and continued distance. They know that my separation from the dungeon is an action of bravery and accomplishment, not a justification for further shame and depreciation. I could have resorted to the shadows, but I have chosen different. I belong in the light because I have chosen so.
Wow, Averry. Powerful.
Thank you.
Powerful. Thank you. Thank you for today. Thanks for sharing so much of yourself. I think that's a good place for us to end. And that was just so great. And as we wrap up, I'm wondering how people can get in touch with you. I mean, we mentioned Instagram. People can follow you, Averry Cox Counseling, and any other places where people can find you or reach out to you?
Yes, you could go to my website, which is averycoxcounseling.com for therapy. And my email is avery@averycoxcounseling.com. So you go to my website and then you could email me from there. But those are the two ways.
Perfect. And that's Averry with 2 R's. I'll drop it in the show notes.
2 R's. Yes.
So you can check that out in the show notes. Averry, thanks so much for today.
Thank you for having me and talking about this. And all the work that you do also. All your episodes are really important. So thank you for this.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing with us today. Thanks for listening to this episode of Untethered to Rooted. Untethered to Rooted is produced and hosted by me, Dana Daugherty. Original music was composed and performed by the ever-talented Daniel Dickinson. Thanks so much to our guests for sharing with us today. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. And follow us on social at Untethered to Rooted. And if you didn't like it, what podcast? Dana who? Until next time, take and give good care.